At I had a surprising, unreasonable moment of panic this week, and I thought I'd take a minute to talk with you about how my moment of panic can help you transform the health of your team and take what you think maybe, yeah, that's just the way it is when you're working with people, and upgrade your team so that it's more effective and more fun for you and more hard hitting. In fact, I am Aaron Schmuckler, the CEO of the Yes Works, where growth driven leaders come to us to help them build connected, adaptable, high impact teams before status quo can kill momentum. And status quo, man, what a trap for all of us. It can easily lure us in. So let me tell you the story of my panic. I was in a meeting and we were talking with the head of a tech company, and it's a brain health tech company. And I had a question. We were all asking the leader of this company questions to better understand his product and its purpose. And I said something in the meeting, and someone else down at the other end of the table disagreed with it. And uh, I was going to ask a question, and I wanted to give that question a bit of context, a framework. So I stated a premise. I would say I stated a half a premise before I could ask the question, and I was interrupted by somebody at the end of the table who said immediately, "I have to interrupt because you're wrong." And then she took the conversation in a different direction from the one that I had been taking it in. And I remember just kind of watching that happen, thinking to myself, my question isn't all that important to me. And I was actually a bit self-congratulatory that I was unbothered and didn't feel the need that I would have felt, a few years ago, to wrest control back, interrupt her in return, get all up in arms about the fact that I had been interrupted. This is not where the panic set in. The panic set in later, after the meeting, when she came up to me and she said, "I'm so sorry I interrupted you, but," and then proceeded to lay out her justification about why she couldn't let what I had said stand. And I, meaning it, I said, "It's okay. You misunderstood me, and that's okay too." And she, her eyebrows shot up, her head shot back. She said, "Oh," and she spun on her heel and walked abruptly out of the room, clearly, I would say clearly angry. It sure seemed like she was angry, clearly upset by my having said that she had misunderstood me. And this is when the panic set in. I wasn't even face to face with her anymore. My panic set in when she ended the conversation and strode out, upset upset by me. And I noticed my body chemistry changed, like adrenaline and or cortisol, these stress and panic hormones coursing through my body, the feeling in all of my muscles of fight or flight. It was really a remarkable moment. And here I was, not faced with this person even anymore. I just was in the room, surrounded by people who had not seen or heard what we'd said. Nobody was paying any attention. So I had a seat because I was curious. I was like, what? Why am I so upset by this? What am I scared of? And it is an interesting distinction for me to make. I probably would have, at some other point, thought of it as anger. I recognized it as fear, and I asked myself, what am I afraid of? And it was my inner wounded child who answered me. And I think, I've been paying attention to somebody named Joe Hudson recently, and I think it's the things that he said that had me sit down and think about this way. I recognized that I had, almost in a flash, told myself the story that she was going to go out into this community that matters to me. She was going to tell everybody what an word I won't use right now, what a jerk I was, how inconsiderate, rude, whatever. I don't even know what I thought she was going to say. And the story I told myself was her story was going to be so compelling that I wasn't going to be able to be a part of this community anymore. People were going to look at me differently. I wasn't going to be able to uh, do business in this community anymore. That was going to lead to my failing and my not being able to make a living. I mean, all out of this one moment where she strode out of the room angry with me. And I realized also I had this compulsion to go and find someone who I know had had some trouble with her in the past and say, "Hey, yeah, his name is not Bob. Bob, can I tell you what just happened?" So I found myself looking for some companionship, some opportunity to gossip, so that I wouldn't feel as alone as I felt in that moment and frightened of the aloneness. Here's why this matters to you and why I'm taking this time to tell you about my unreasonable moment of panic. Your team, my experience tells me, your team presses your panic button, and you may recognize it only as an anger button or a frustration button or a hopelessness button. You may be saying things like, "Yeah, that's just the way it is with this person," or "That's just the way it is with when you're working with people." Every act of obstruction in your company, of argument, raised voices, withheld opinions, uh, uh, what do you call it? The talk about hoarded information, gossip, sabotage, the meeting that people have after the meeting where they say, "I know the boss wanted this, I'm not doing that," or you, triangulation, people naysaying, us versus them posturing, all these things that are very challenging for us with our teams, that where they seem to be acting unreasonable, where they seem to be not being a team player, where they seem to be apathetic even. All of those experiences that you have with them, that's what happens when the inner child hits the panic button. That wounded inner child, and we've all got one, when that wounded inner child hits the panic button, that's what happens. And so a lot of the responses that we have to these kinds of behaviors actually further entrench that panic. And instead of actually leading to more effective behaviors, instead of actually remedying those behaviors, what they might do is send people into even more covert, passive aggressive kinds of behaviors where the panicked inner child is still running the ship. They're just hiding that panic even better. They're hiding the antisocial, dysfunctional behaviors even better so that they don't incur your displeasure anymore. And if you're like me, you are tired of hearing about psychological safety. You don't like that term. Perhaps it sounds so clinical and it seems so irrelevant. It's like, look, we're not here for psychology. We're here to get shit done. Right. So don't talk to me about psychological safety. I just want you to be a grown up and get shit done. And this grown up thing, that's so important, right? When I hear leaders say, I just want to work with grown-ups. Well, psychological safety, or the concept, forget the term. It's psychological safety that is required if we want to work with grown-ups. If you want to work with panicked children, then by all means keep doing what you're doing. That's getting people to, without your knowing it, right? I'm not saying that I do this too. I respond to people in ways that further entrench and further panic that wounded inner child. That something happened to all of us in our childhoods that made us think maybe we're going to be excluded, maybe we're going to be unloved, maybe we're unlovable. It shouldn't matter in the business context. Leave all that stuff at home, except that we can't. So if we want to work with grown-ups, and I know we all really do. If we want to work with grown-ups, then we have to help people access their grown-ups. And the only way to access their grown-ups is to soothe that inner child. And I'm not saying we need to stop and psychologize and play armchair psychologists and ask them, who was it who didn't hug you enough? We don't need to placate them. I am not suggesting any of that. The only thing we need to do is to help that inner child feel seen and heard. That might sound like, seems like this is really important to you, or thank you for bringing up these concerns. I know what you want to do is to help prevent us from walking off a cliff and doing something that's going to hurt the company. So thank you very much for that. Right? That one recognition, it could be a one sentence thing that just kind of helps them recognize that you recognize them. Seems like this is upsetting to you. Seems like, or it sounds like you've really got a lot invested in the way we've been doing things in the past. Seems like you're concerned that the change that I'm asking for won't work as well as what we've been doing, right? Any one of those sentences could go the distance to helping that inner child feel seen and heard and therefore recognized and safe. And don't worry if you get it wrong. If you say, seems like this is really important to you, they might not register it that way. And they'll say, no, it's not that it's important to me. It's that this isn't going to work. You get to say, got it. Okay, well, thank you so much for bringing up your concerns that this isn't going to work. And then, and only then, once you've recognized that inner child and made that inner child feel safe and seen, only then is the adult even listening. So if you want to work with adults, you've got to recognize that all of us are affected by that inner wound that may have happened in our childhoods. We're all working to heal from it. We're never going to maybe get there all the way. We can make progress and we can help each other along the way. And in the meantime, because we want to work with the adults, we've got to set that inner child at ease, because that's how our brains have evolved, right? We humans with our soft hands and our soft feet, and our slow running and our weak climbing and our ineffectual swimming, we are not good at surviving on our own. We need the community. We need the tribe to survive. And so our brains have been wired to require from us that we ensure that we don't become excluded. And so, the experiences of exclusion that I had as a kid created this panic button in my brain that when I think there's maybe some chance of my being excluded, my brain goes haywire. And I'm not different from the people on your team. And I'm not different from you. This is just a reality that we have to contend with when we're working with humans. And a lot of what we have learned about how to respond to people who are behaving in antisocial or anti-productive ways, a lot of what we have learned will backfire. And so we've got to learn something new and something different. And there's an expression that comes from the military that's in my mind right now, which is that something to the effect of, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. In other words, when we imagine what's going to happen when, if somebody says something disrespectful to me, or if somebody makes me change something or asks me to change something that I don't want to change, this is the very composed and grown-up way that I'm going to deal with it. This is the very effective way that I'm going to respond. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And that is something that is understood and known in the military. And in those circumstances, they're talking about this in the context of battle, right? They're talking about this in the context of battle. And that's where my brain thought it was, right? My brain went to panic. It sent those panic chemicals through my body. And I did, in fact, fall to the level of my training. And I'm so grateful that I have trained myself and worked with others to help train me so that my level of training was, instead of chasing her down or instead of going to Bob to triangulate and gossip and seek some comfort for that wound, I sat down to investigate with myself what has got me so worked up. That was rising, or falling rather, to the level of my training, which is significant. And so the next conversation that I had with her was more productive because, once again, I brought out my training. And this is the reason that at the Yes Works, we work with whole teams together to train them in effective communication, collaboration, and leadership. We train people. We don't just give them information. We train, we drill, we give them a framework like you would learn in the military about how to deal with a battle situation, because our inner wounded children sometimes feel embattled. And in those circumstances, having a framework that you have trained in, that you have done reps in, that you can really delineate for yourself in those moments of panic, that is what allows us to not be so limited by that level of training and not fall nearly so far as we could, because we're always going to fall to the level of our training, not rise to the level of our expectations. So when you think about your team dynamics, it's not going to be enough to know what the best ways are to respond to one another when the chips are down and when people are feeling threatened, or when people are feeling frightened, or when people simply maybe recognize what they're going through as anger. It is not enough to set expectations with one another. It's also critical to train to be effective at communication, collaboration, leadership, responding to one another, and letting the adults come out to play, because those inner wounded children, as much as we may feel for them, they're not effective. So if we can help you transform the dynamics in your team, I hope you reach out. Thanks.